All right, this is DBQ Document 2. Um, so this is the right here in the title, the testimony of a Savannah Loyalist named John Hopkins. So right here in the first sentence of the description for this document, which if you haven't read these, you really need to because they're short and they give you a lot of context for what the document is about to tell you. So in this first sentence, it says, it's generally accepted that Georgia had the highest percentage of loyalists of any of the 13 colonies. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, Georgia was the youngest colony, which means that most of the people, or many of the people, who had moved, who were currently living in Georgia, had moved there directly from England. In other words, Georgia was only 40 years old at this point. So a lot of the residents who were there were not second and third generation Georgians. They were first generation. They had moved there from Great Britain. Whereas if you look at a colony like Massachusetts that had been around for, several hundred years at that point, many of them, their parents and grandparents and great grandparents and great great grandparents had lived in the colonies. And so they felt a closer connection to the colony, whereas many of the people in Georgia felt a closer connection to Great Britain. Another one is that Georgia was supported financially by England. Georgia would not have been self-sufficient had it not been for England. Um, the British Army was constantly protecting Georgia, including from potential Indian wars, as well as, as we know, the War of Jenkins' Ear and a potential Spanish invasion from St. Augustine, which we learned about last unit. And the governor of Georgia, the royal governor appointed by the king, was extremely well liked. So there are quite a few reasons why this was the case. But nevertheless, Georgia was extremely well liked, and I'm getting lots of email pop-ups, so that's fun. Um, Georgia was extremely pro-loyalist. Um, Now, this is a testimony. In other words, this is a official court statement by this guy, John Hopkins. So John Hopkins says about 9 o'clock in the evening, I was sitting at supper with my family, and there came to my house a number of people, who were in disguise. Oh my gosh, we got to stop that. Oh, that's not better. All right, there we go. Um, there's a number of people that show up at his door. Some of them are in disguise, and they walk in. They laid hold of me. In other words, they grabbed him without saying anything, and basically drag him out to the outside of town. He's just sitting to dinner with his family at 9 p.m. and they just break into his house and drag him out. They consulted to tar and feather me. In other words, they were talking about it, but the majority resolved to carry me to a more public place. We're going to tar and feather you, bud, but we're not going to do it here, where it's this nice quiet street. So accordingly, they led me into the middle of the square near the dial. He means a sundial, which would have been the way that they told time, right? Near the dial in Savannah, and stripped me of my jacket and shirt, and with great reluctance left the rest of my apparel on me. And then they proceeded to tar and feather me. So they stripped this guy down to basically to his pants and pour boiling hot tar on him and then throw feathers on him to make him look ridiculous, and then put me in a cart and carted me up and down the streets of Savannah for upwards of 3 hours. He's being dragged around the city of Savannah until midnight. During that time, they carted me to the Liberty Tree, which is just a tree in Savannah, that they decided they call the Liberty Tree. There's nothing all that special about it. And then, this guy says, oh, I'm fat, but I'll go up in that tree and hang you if I have to. Unless you drink this toast and say, we hate the Tories and go American liberty. And if he doesn't do that, I should be hung immediately, which request I was obliged to comply with. In other words, they gave me a choice. I could either toast to, down with the Tories, which is another name for loyalists, or they're going to hang me. Well, what choice would you have made? Yeah, John Hopkins made the same one. He said, yeah, sure, yeah, Tories, terrible. American liberty, go Patriots, and then they're abused me, gave me ill language, blah blah blah, and then they're talking about how they're going to tar and feather they intended to continue on until they had tarred and feathered all the Tories, or words to that effect. In other words, they said something like that. I can't remember exactly. And then between the hours of 12 and 1 o'clock, they discharged me at the Vindu house with orders to beg all American pardon. In other words, they dropped him off and said, you better ask for forgiveness. Not we should be apologizing, but you should be apologizing to us for ever daring to be a loyalist. So that is document number 2.